For years, people wondered why the world's most fearless action star could run toward danger yet never walk toward his own daughter. Today, at 19, Suri Null, the girl once known to the world as Suri Cruise, has finally broken her silence. She has not spoken through interviews or television appearances, but through the life she has chosen to build far away from her father's shadow. What her story reveals is heavier, sadder, and more painful than anyone expected. This is the truth she carried alone for more than a decade, the story of the day everything began to fall apart. When Suri looks back on her childhood, she can trace every fracture to a moment she was far too young to understand. She was born on April 18, 2006, at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica. Her birth was surrounded not by celebration, but by silence. Her mother, Katie Holmes, followed Scientology's silent birth expectations, suppressing every cry of pain while men in dark suits stood nearby, watching and enforcing rituals she never chose for herself. Tom Cruise called it devotion. Katie called it survival. For Suri, it became the first chapter of a life shaped by rules she would spend years trying to escape. During her earliest years, Suri lived in a world designed to appear perfect from the outside: red carpets, magazine covers, private estates, security teams, and the image of a flawless Hollywood family. But behind closed doors, cracks were already spreading. Katie's parents became alarmed by the growing influence surrounding their daughter and granddaughter. Friends noticed Katie rarely went anywhere alone, constantly accompanied by Scientology associates who moved like silent shadows, monitoring her every move as though she were living under invisible surveillance. Suri, however, knew none of this. What she remembered were footsteps in the hallway, movie nights with her parents, warm embraces, and a father who seemed larger than life. But when she turned 6, the footsteps stopped. The house became quiet, and the man who once held her hand while walking through New York suddenly disappeared from her daily life. June 2012 became the year everything changed. Her mother filed for divorce just days before Tom Cruise's 50th birthday in what would become one of Hollywood's fastest and most shocking separations. To the public, it looked like another celebrity breakup. To a 6-year-old child, it felt like losing half of her universe without warning. Yet Suri did not cry out. She simply became silent, because children do not always need explanations to understand when someone they love is gone. In the months after the divorce filing, the world believed Katie Holmes had made a sudden and bold decision. But the truth Suri only understood years later, was that Katie had been planning her escape with military-level precision. Behind polished smiles and magazine covers, she lived in constant fear. She changed phones repeatedly, avoided certain hallways in her home because she believed they were monitored, and replaced staff members she suspected were reporting back to the Church of Scientology. Every night, she held her daughter tighter, terrified that one wrong move would cost her custody. Katie chose New York as her battleground because she knew its laws favored a parent seeking to protect a child's stability. She filed for divorce while Tom was in Iceland filming Oblivion, ensuring he would never see it coming. He discovered the divorce the same way the rest of the world did, through headlines. For a man who had spent decades controlling his public image, it was a devastating blow. Court documents later revealed that the one thing Katie fought for above all else was the right to raise Suri outside Scientology. Former members claimed Katie feared that as Suri grew older, she could be pushed into Scientology's strict Sea Org program, a place she believed no child should ever be forced into. To prevent that future, Katie was willing to sacrifice her career, friendships, privacy, safety, and everything else she had left. By July 2012, only 11 days after the filing, the divorce was finalized. Tom agreed to pay approximately $400,000 annually in child support, cover medical and educational expenses, and allow Katie full custody. But money was never what Katie truly wanted. Freedom was. The next day, Katie and Suri left Los Angeles almost like ghosts, quietly beginning a new life in New York City with only a few suitcases and the hope that distance could protect them. For Suri, the move felt like waking up in a world where her father existed everywhere, on movie screens, posters, and newspaper covers, but never beside her. As she grew older, life became a quiet routine centered around her mother's protection. Katie walked her to school, cooked simple meals, helped with homework, and did everything she could to shield her daughter from relentless media attention. But there was one thing she could never protect her from: silence. As the years passed, Suri watched her father not as a daughter, but as a distant observer. She saw him hanging from skyscrapers, racing through dangerous action scenes, and performing stunts no other actor dared attempt. His face appeared everywhere she went: bookstores, movie theaters, magazines, everywhere except in her life. The absence became heavier with every birthday that passed without a message, a phone call, or any sign that he remembered the little girl he once called a miracle. When she turned 10, the questions inside her became sharper. "Where's Dad?" slowly became "Why doesn't he come?" At first, she tried comforting herself by believing he was simply too busy, too occupied saving the world on screen to appear in her world off screen. But eventually, even a child understands the difference between being busy and making a choice. By her early teenage years, she watched her friends being picked up by their fathers after rehearsals and sports practices. She stood quietly at the curb pretending it did not hurt. She learned emotional independence not because she wanted to, but because she had no other choice. She rode the subway alone, completed school projects by herself, and carried her disappointments silently so her mother would not worry. Meanwhile, the media continued speculating. Reports circulated in 2013 claiming Tom had only seen Suri once after the divorce. After that, there were no confirmed visits, photographs, or public appearances together. To the world, it became another Hollywood mystery. To Suri, it was simply her life, a life shaped by a father who felt more like a rumor than a memory. Yet even in that emptiness, she never learned to hate him. Children rarely hate. They ache. By the time Suri turned 14 in 2020, she had become old enough to search for answers on her own. Throughout her childhood, she had overheard fragments of conversations adults tried to hide from her, whispers about Scientology, custody battles, restrictions, rules, and control. During the pandemic, with the world shut down and endless hours alone with her thoughts, she finally began searching for the truth no one had ever explained to her. She read interviews, documentaries, and testimonies from former Scientology members. Although she never knew the complete story, she began seeing herself reflected between the lines, not directly mentioned, but as collateral damage from a system she never chose to belong to. Former members often described being discouraged from maintaining close relationships with people outside the organization. Some claimed family ties could even be severed if someone left or rejected involvement. Suri was only a child, but she understood what outside meant. It meant distance. It meant separation. It meant having a father who either could not or would not cross a line drawn by something larger than love itself. That realization broke something inside her. She did not grow up hating Tom Cruise. She grew up waiting for him, waiting for birthday messages, visits, and moments where he would choose her over everything else. But as she grew older, she slowly realized she had spent 12 years standing in a doorway, listening for footsteps she would never hear again. At 15, she once walked into the kitchen and saw her mother quietly wiping tears away after reading an article about Tom's newest blockbuster premiere. Suri did not ask questions. She did not need to. The truth between them was already heavy, silent, and understood. Katie had carried the pain of her daughter's abandonment alone for years. Even then, she never spoke badly about Tom. She never used bitterness to shield Suri from reality. Instead, she believed some truths are too painful to give a child before they are ready. And by 16, Suri was finally ready, not for the media's version of the truth, but for her own. Turning 18 in April 2024 was more than a birthday. It was a turning point. For the first time, the law recognized her as someone capable of making her own choices, speaking her own truth, and defining her identity without permission from anyone, including the man whose last name she had carried her entire life. In the weeks leading to her birthday, she worked on college application essays, pouring years of silence into words that reportedly moved even admissions officers. In one essay, she wrote, "Sometimes we don't grow up with love. We grow up with the space that love leaves behind." It was the first time she had openly admitted what she had felt since she was 6 years old. She never mentioned her father by name. She did not need to. Everyone already knew. For the first time, however, the story belonged to her rather than the headlines. While other teenagers celebrated turning 18 with parties, Suri spent her birthday staring into a mirror, seeing a young woman who had spent half her life grieving someone who was still alive. She finally understood she no longer needed to wait for a phone call that would never come, a hug that would never arrive, or an explanation that would never be offered. That was the moment she made a quiet but powerful decision: she would no longer carry the burden of being Tom Cruise's daughter. On May 17, 2024, she officially changed her name to Suri Noelle Holmes, choosing her mother's middle name as a tribute to the woman who had guided her through every storm alone. She expected to cry, but instead she felt relief, the kind of relief that comes when someone finally lets go of a thread that has caused nothing but pain. The world noticed the name change immediately. It appeared in her high school graduation program, on the cast list for her performance in the Addams Family musical, and later on acceptance documents for Carnegie Mellon University, where she began studying fashion. Some people called it rebellion, but it was not rebellion at all. It was freedom, the kind of freedom a girl discovers only after surviving 12 years of silence. By the time Suri began her freshman year at Carnegie Mellon University in the fall of 2024, she had already completed the transformation she had spent years fighting toward. She was no longer the child photographed at every moment, no longer the girl the world pitted for growing up without her father, and no longer the symbol of a Hollywood,